Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to Chelsea Fan TV and welcome to another episode of the Chelsea Fan TV podcast. And Premier League table doesn't make good reading after 2 games with 1 point on the board for the Blues, but the performances have been better than the points total suggests, and there are some positive signs to take forward. But Luton, we must win on Friday night. We've had injury news on Carney Chukwuemeka, not ideal. New goalkeeper through the door as well, so there are some signings coming in. We need to bring some more attackers, but life is not as bleak as it may look from the outside, as rival fans make out, as the media might make out. This team is going in the right direction, I feel, but there's still a few things that need tweaking. There's still a few things that we do need to get right and do need to sort out. And it's going to be a long road. You know, you're not going to go from 12th place finish to suddenly being an amazing team with all these new signings coming through the door. But as always, there's loads to get into. I'm delighted to be joined by Michel for this week's episode. Thank you for joining me. Obviously, last season was a disaster. We know that. We've got 1 point on the board, as I said, from the first 2 games. But weirdly, having been to the games and like been around the match-going fans and stuff, there's not this feeling of doom and gloom and that, oh, we're shit, oh, it's going to be another season like last season. There's a sort of still a weird sense of positivity. I mean, do you feel the same way given what we've seen in the first 2 games?
Absolutely. I was very critical last season, and I was very skeptical. And I'd almost say I feel naive right now because I am hopeful, and I genuinely do think that this is going to take us more positive places. And like you said, the last 2 games, I don't think really represent 1 point, if you know what I mean. I genuinely see us moving forward, despite still having a long way to go. So I absolutely get your point of view, and probably a lot of other fans' point of view, that it's sort of an awkward feeling and situation to be in right now, because there are glimpses of hopes, but we're not really getting the results we're hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, like last season, like you sort of knew we were going to lose every week, and that's kind of a different feeling. And there's like that sort of doom and gloom around the place. But yeah, we've lost, and it was a poor result, and the second half was terrible at West Ham. But I was seeing positives like this. There's so many new signings. Essentially, the whole squad has been changed in basically a year. There's hardly, from 2 years ago when we won the Champions League, there's 3 players still at the club that are playing a prominent role. It's a big change, and you know, change takes time. But obviously, you know, there's not really any patience in football and all that sort of stuff, and you need to get results pretty quickly. And obviously, Pochettino's he's fully aware of that. But I've liked what I've seen. You know, I think we've got a young, hungry squad. There's players that are going to develop over the course of the season and get better and have got so much potential to fill. We're already seeing some of those youngsters fulfilling their potential, the likes of Enzo Fernandez. I think he's had a superb start to the season, despite obviously a shocking penalty against West Ham. And there's others out there that are good, exciting talents. I mean, we'll get into some of them. Raheem Sterling had a very good game as well. But I mean, let's touch on, before we go into the game a little bit, let's touch on sort of the recruitment so far. Obviously, it's a kind of a different route that Chelsea are going down. You know, in years gone by under Roman, we didn't tend to sign that many younger players with potential. We'd always go and get big names, and the big names out there, sort of perceived finished articles with sort of mixed success. Now it's kind of a complete 360, and we're going the opposite direction, where we're bringing in a lot of talented youngsters who on long-term contracts, who we hope are going to have their best years at the club. I mean, what have you made of the recruitment? Because there's a lot of sort of skepticism around it in terms of, well, you know, yes, it's great to have a lot of talented youngsters, but you also need you need a few more finished article players in there. Where do you stand on it? Because like I like it. I like what we're doing, but at the same time, I feel we could maybe do with 1 or 2 more experienced heads in there.
Yeah, no, I think we can agree on that. I think it's very interesting. I actually quite like the long contracts as well, because I firmly believe that, yes, you need to be talented, you need to be hardworking, etc., but you also need to actually want and come and play for the club you are signing for. And I think it makes the players think twice when they're signing such a long contract. And I understand the project a bit more now that we brought in Poch, because we do know he's really good with younger players. But I'm also very happy that we still have a person like Thiago Silva, who is extremely experienced and is still such a, I'd almost say like a father figure. He's so involved in the club and he's so willing to more or less take everyone under his wing. So I completely agree with you, and I get your point of view that I think it would be really nice to have a few more experienced players who can take all these young players under the wing and sort of guide them. Because yes, I think Poch is the man for the job, but it's a lot of pressure to put on only one person. He sort of needs his assistants almost on the pitch as well.
You need your senior pros, and like there are a few at the club. Obviously, Thiago Silva, even Raheem Sterling is going to have a very important role to play. Someone, even though he's 27, 28, which is still quite young, prime of his career, but he's achieved so much in the game. And we've given how young our squad is. Like 27, he's probably the second oldest in the squad behind Thiago Silva. In fact, I'm almost certain he is, which is kind of mad. But you're going to have to rely on these guys to step up, to deliver, to be like to be sort of a father figure within the squad. But I still look at this side, and obviously we've got 2 goals averaging a goal a game so far. We've created quite a few decent chances, but I like the look of Nicholas Jackson. I think he's proven a lot of people wrong in terms of what people were expecting when he came in. Obviously had a great pre-season, and I think in the first 2 games he's done well. He looks like a handful. He links up the play well. He runs the channels. He looks like a handful, and I think he's going to be a good player for us. But he's still young, and he hasn't got that ruthless instinct in front of goal yet. I'm not saying he's never going to have it, but he doesn't have it right now. And then you've got the other centre forward option in Amanda Broja, who hasn't played much for the club anyway, is still not recovered from an ACL injury back in December. We don't really know how good he is, but again, he's another young striker who is kind of completely unproven. Not completely unproven, but is still relatively unproven. I just look at it and I just think we spent all this money, and I think we've made some good acquisitions. But at the same time, I'm still looking at this team and I just think, where are the goals coming from? With no Nkunku in the side, I can't see where regular goal scorers are in that team. I just don't think there are any.
No, and we briefly talked about this before we started to record as well, that I'd almost say it's very much unlike us to have someone up front who's just going to bang in 2 to 3 goals each game. And it has been a long time since we had that front figure when it comes to goal scoring. I, however, think that Nicholas Jackson could be that person eventually, or at least I hope so, because he's a very, very clever footballer. And I think if he's linked up with the right people around him, he has a lot of potential. I'm not saying he's gonna bang on with a lot of goals, but if he could at least contribute mainly, and then we'd had 2 or 3 other players who would also contribute, I actually think it could work out. For example, if you take the likes of Nani Madueke, he's extremely young as well, but he is very, very mature in his approach to football in general. I'd almost just say he keeps his head down and just works, and I think that rubs off on every single player. So I think if they're groomed the right way, he could be. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of my only issue is that we've got a lot of players that could be good, in a year or 2's time, but we don't have that many players that are good right now in terms of good to make. These are all good players, but I mean in terms of making an impact right now on a regular basis, week in, week out, giving us the goals, giving us the creativity that we need to win the match, to win games, and to finish in the top 4, top 5 to get us back in the Champions League. It's a refreshing recruitment strategy and a refreshing way of doing things, getting these talented young players in. But at the same time, it's putting a huge amount of pressure on the manager and those players themselves to come in and perform pretty much straight away, and for Pochettino to try and get something out of these guys almost instantly. And it's like it doesn't work like that. unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. Not all these signings are going to work out. Not all these guys are going to hit the ground running. Some will do better than others. Of course they will. But I still don't know. We've got 2 weeks left in the transfer window, or 10 days, or whatever it is. We still need another attacking player. We still need some form of a centre forward or someone. Problem is, there's not that many names out there. It's more than likely going to be another youngster with potential, like Madueke, like Mudryk, like all these guys with potential. Do you have any concerns that potentially, I mean, maybe this season potentially, but do you think this recruitment strategy, I mean, I don't worry about it in the long term, but in the immediate short term, do you feel, because I'm a bit unsure about this, but do you feel potentially in the immediate short term, i.e. this season, that this recruitment strategy with not that many experienced pros in the side could actually be a problem for us?
Yes and no. I think it's the why that's kind of hard to put your finger on. But I absolutely get your point with it's most likely going to be rushed, or it could be potentially be a very rushed process, and you might not get out of them what you want to get out of them because you're rushing everything and you sort of need them to deliver here and now rather than, all right, take your time, make sure to, etc., etc., etc. So I personally feel like it could go both ways, but I think it's hard to put a finger on, because I don't really know. Like, it's just it could genuinely go both
Yeah.
ways.
I think that's the difficult thing as well. There's not like a
Yeah,
definitive answer. Like, it could be amazing, or we could look back in a few years and be like, "Shit, that was
yeah.
that was like
Honestly.
that was a complete disaster." Trying to go
But
down that route.
I will say this, that I genuinely believe that you need balance. I like what he's trying to do, and I'm certain it is going to work out in the long term. But I get where you're coming from when we speak short term. We need to deliver here now. We don't want to finish 12th yet again. So absolutely, it would make a lot of sense to bring in more experienced players who will help the younger ones blossom, and they will help the team deliver here now. But yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. I mean, only time's going to tell. Hopefully, we can make some positive acquisitions in what's remaining of the window. Maybe a centre forward, maybe definitely an attacking midfield player or winger. But in terms of kind of the players we've got so far, in terms of some of the guys that have played the matches at the moment, has anyone stood out to you, sort of like in the first couple of games? Anyone where you're thinking, yeah, this is going to be kind of a breakout season for them? I mean, for me, I think Enzo Fernandez, again, who stood out he stood out last season. We came into a Chelsea side that was just all over the place. The club at probably its lowest point in a long time, and he was a bright spark there. He started this season a fantastic performance against Liverpool. Good in the first half against West Ham, penalty miss aside. Second half, like everyone else, he kind of went missing a little bit, but he's had two positive performances. With Moises Caicedo alongside him, once he gets up to speed, I think that's going to be a great partnership in there. I mean, has Enzo impressed you? Do you think he's going to be a crucial player for us this season?
I really like Nicholas Jackson. I like him because he gets it. He knows where to run, even though he's lacking end product. He's just a very, very clever footballer. And being partnered up with someone who gets the way he want to play, I actually think he's gonna be very important for us. I would have wished to see Nkunku and Madueke, because I'm a very massive fan of the way he carries himself, Madueke, and I was very pleasantly surprised to see how quickly Nkunku was important for us in preseason. So I had really hoped to talk more about them, but thankfully Noni is slowly starting to be incorporated again. We will have to wait for Nkunku. but definitely Nicholas Jackson. I think there's so much more to him than what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think it's just a massive disappointment for all Chelsea fans that we're not going to see the Nkunku
Yeah.
Jackson link up until next year. We saw a bit of it in pre-season. Obviously, it still needs work and stuff, but I do feel that those two together, I think they would have got the best out of each other. Someone like, I'm not saying we don't have anyone else like Nkunku. Well, I mean, maybe we don't, but someone
Mm.
that's going to be able to, play those passes through that not really many other players in the team can do, and that understanding between Jackson and Nkunku is going to be so important. But we're gonna have to bide our time and kind
Yeah.
of see what happens in that. And I wanted to talk about a couple of other players that have come in for a bit of stick recently. Mudryk, who came in for big money last summer. That was last January, even last January. Oh yeah, sorry, came in January, so he's hardly been here at all.
Yeah.
I think people are a bit harsh on him in terms of like outside, like they just purely look at the football. But this is a young kid that's played in the Ukrainian league. No disrespect, the Ukrainian league is
Mm.
pretty poor in comparison to the Premier League. It's a huge
Yeah.
step up, and it's not just a footballing step up. He's leaving behind his country like decimated by war. His family still live there. He's a young kid, early 20s. New language, new country, new surroundings, all these things that people don't tend to think about. And you know what? Yeah, his performances on the pitch haven't been amazing. But, we saw his debut against Liverpool, how good he was when he came off the bench. He's had moments here and there.
Mm.
But if you actually look at it, he's played, I think he's started for Chelsea 7 times since he joined. It's not an awful lot of time. It's hard to stand out in that side last season. Well, what have you made of the criticism of Mudryk? Because I know everyone talks about his performance at West Ham. They didn't think he was that good, but
Mm.
I saw some positive signs in terms of he was taking his defender on, he was beating his defender. There was a few dangerous balls into the box, but there was no one there. I mean, I still fully back this guy. I'm still confident in him. I mean, how do you feel about Mudryk? But I will say that there's definitely no hiding from the fact that he does need to start delivering, and he needs to start
Yeah.
doing it as soon as possible. I mean, what are your thoughts on Mudryk?
I absolutely rate him. I'd go as far and say I love him. Like I genuinely, um, I agree with absolutely everything you say about the personal stuff he's going on. I think people are very quick to forget that it's not all about stats. It's not all about how you deliver. There's so much going on behind the scene that we do not know about. And I personally think we should take a lot more into consideration because they're human beings just like you and I. And if we're having a shitty day or if we're having a tough year, it will show in whatever we do. And this is just in the public eye. And there's so many expectations because it's the best league in the world when it comes to football. So I absolutely agree with everything you're saying. Um, I 100% back him, and I just hope that he will. I almost want to sort of blame the managers a little bit as well because he hasn't really been started consistently
Hmm.
the way I would have preferred him to start. I actually really had hoped he would have started against Liverpool. That did not happen. So like, all right, fair enough. Then maybe he'll get 45 minutes in second half. That did not happen either. He had what
He
10
played
minutes,
10 minutes against Liverpool, and
and
then he
he's
played
still
a half against West Ham. But
yeah, and
it would have been less if Carney didn't get injured. It would have been,
yeah.
who knows how long it would have been. Yeah.
That's the thing, isn't it? And he still managed to deliver in the game against Liverpool. He did not really manage to make the biggest impact on me at West Ham away, but there's so much more to it. And I think the more consistency you can incorporate in the likes of a person like Mudryk, it will rub off. And he was phenomenal in preseason. He
He
was
was good.
absolutely
He was
he was
great.
absolutely phenomenal. Him and Nicholas Jackson, it was just I hope that the small sparks will explode soon because we can go back to this a million times. We have so many players who are very likable to turn into something greater, but it's just they need sort of that final kick. And I feel like we can find excuses for every single player, but is not really giving us the result here and now. And I think Mudryk is another great example of he could be great. We've seen a lot of glimpses of it. He's ridiculously fast.
Yeah.
But it's just that end product. That's our main issue. We're lacking end product in all over the place.
I mean, you could say that about literally all of the attackers we've got, all lack end product. I mean, you probably say Sterling is the one that throughout his career has demonstrated the fact that he's got the most end product. But even him, he's like, he gets into good positions. But I mean, some of those balls into the box and some of his finishing ability is poor as well. It is bad. Like, I mean, Madueke, Mudryk, etc. You know, there's ability there, but I mean, they're right at the start of their careers. But you know, none of them have been particularly prolific where they've been beforehand. But I think that, I mean, start of the careers, it's always a little bit difficult to judge. But it's going to rely. I do feel it's going to rely a lot on Sterling to be kind of the big spark in this team until Nkunku comes back. And it's quite a big transformation. Obviously, Sterling last season, awful season. Wasn't just him. It was virtually everyone. Didn't have a good preseason. A lot coming under a lot of criticism. I'll even hold my hands up. I was one of those criticizing him, saying that he shouldn't be starting. He was basically should be fourth choice. And I'm more than happy to be wrong. I want all players to do well for Chelsea. And Sterling, you know, if he proves me wrong, great. I'd love that to be the case. And he started the first 2 games of the season. You could argue because Madueke's not been fit or whatever, but he started. And I'll probably say the game against West Ham was his best performance in a Chelsea shirt. Not just out of the 2 games. I think it's the best performance he's put in for the club. He looked like the Sterling we actually paid the money for. You know, direct, taking players on, causing problems, putting balls into the box. You know, obviously, he wins the penalty. He needs to continue this. I think working for Pochettino, he likes that. I think he's said as much that he looked forward to working with him, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on him now there was pressure on him last season to sort of to come in and deliver. You know, he left Manchester City, said he wanted to be the main man in this Chelsea team. Now you've got to step up and deliver the performances. But in terms of Sterling, it's a massive season for him. But I presume, like myself, you've been impressed with what he's done so far in the first 2 games, even if it's lacked a bit of end product still.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been very hard on him. Even before he came to Chelsea, I was never really the biggest fan of him for other reasons. But I have been very hard on him and I have been criticizing him. And I personally feel like he's been very deserving of that criticism. I will, however, also, like you said, everyone needs to do great for the club. It's not, they're here to stay. And I will gladly take back whatever I've said about him if he's proving me wrong. And if he's deserving of praise, he will get my praise. And he was arguably the better guy during West Ham away. There were a few situations where I would have liked him to just take a shot rather than just continue dribbling. But it's still a work in progress. And I think we also need to sort of have a bit more patience, because I also feel like us as Chelsea fans were very quick to react, very quick to criticize and, oh, that didn't go well, now I hate him. Like,
yeah, it's kind of mad. It's like sort of, it's been 2 games and suddenly people are like, this guy's shit, he's not good enough for Chelsea.
yeah.
Like, when did we start judging players after 2 games?
Yeah.
Like, it's mad. Like, I've always, like, we all do it sometimes. Like, oh, it's just like in the heat of the moment. Oh, he's so shit. Oh, why did we sign him? But I think everyone needs at least 1 season minimum before you can actually start to formulate any kind of concrete opinion. When you've got players that have, like in Mudryk's case, started 7 games for the club, and people are coming to a conclusion that, oh, that he's not good enough. It's like it's too small a sample size. There needs to be a bigger sample size before we start coming to sort of sweeping conclusions on players. But it's kind of the way football is now. I mean, social media doesn't help with those things. But you know, it's unfortunately, I think players probably realize nowadays that, you know, that is kind of what happens. But look, I mean, moving on to West Ham, second half was not good, and we've seen that a number of times last season where we have a good first half, we go in at half time, we come out, and the second half it's like you've put a completely different team on there and we've forgotten how to play. That was obviously a big problem. For me, negatives from the game were the fact that you know what West Ham are going to do. Set piece delivery is going to be great from James Ward-Prowse. They've got big guys in the box in Aged and Zuma. Give away 2 corners inside the first 7 minutes. The first one, I mean, lucky not to concede. Second one, Gallagher and Chukwuemeka's marking on Aged was pathetic, and as a free header and we're a goal down. I just think we lacked doing a few basics. I thought going forward we were okay, but I want to talk about the defence because first 2 games it's kind of caught us out by going with a back 3. I don't think anyone expected to see a back 3. Certainly at the start of this season, maybe at some point in this season we might have seen it. But what's baffled me is the fact that we have played a back 4, whether it's a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3, all pre-season. That's what we've drilled. That's what we've played. And then we've turned up to the start of the season and we've completely switched the system. Now it was okay against Liverpool, but and you know. Disasi was good against Liverpool. Silva was good. Colwell played well. Obviously, Sanchez had a few shaky moments, but he was decent. But another thing as well is we're going with a back line where certainly with the back 3, other than Thiago Silva, 3 of those, including the goalkeeper, are all new to that unit. So as a new goalkeeper, you've got to get an understanding. With Disasi has played 2 games for the club, and Colwell has basically played 2 games for the club as well. He's not a new signing as such, but he's come back. I think we're asking a lot to try and formulate a new unit where playing a back 3, and it just against West Ham, it just looked all over the place. I mean,
yeah,
I don't worry about it, but I just don't understand why. From Luton onwards on Friday, we can't be seeing that back 3 anymore because you know the extra defenders mean we're losing an attacking player when we're struggling for goals anyway, and it's meant to make us look more solid defensively. And we look as open as ever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look like they slipped straight through. I just feel like the problem is going to be could literally be copy pasted onto whatever you talk about. We have Thiago in the back, and that's basically it. They're young. They barely played for us. They barely trained with us. Everything seems so rushed, and I think that's the main problem, isn't it? That, like you said, they're young. They look promising, but are they able to deliver here now? And then because the back line is not really so reliable, then that's going to make the goalie a lot more vulnerable, and problems just are going to continue because other problems sort of breed new problems. I will, however, say that if you want to rely on someone to teach you how to be a proper defender, you wanna have Thiago Silva in. He's been saving our asses in so many situations where it has been baffling to me that he was even able to be there. He's just world class to me, and I hope eventually that will show and rub off on the new unit, if you can say that.
I mean, do you think? Because I'm not saying this is my opinion necessarily. I'm not sure what I think on it, but I've seen a few fans saying that maybe we're playing the back 3 to accommodate Thiago Silva. Well, we know he can play in a 4 because we've seen it last season, but he's not getting. Let's be honest. His performances have been absolutely unbelievable, but he's going to be 39 this year. You know, that's you know, it's getting on right at the end of his career. I don't know if there could be a potential decision to make when Badia Shield comes back as well. That maybe Thiago Silva isn't the automatic starter we all think he is going to be. I wonder if there could be a difficult decision to make there because I look at a back 4 and I think a Colwell and a Badia Shield partnership is something that's very, very exciting, or one of those two partnering Disasi. I'm not saying Thiago Silva should be dropped necessarily, but I think there may be at some point a conversation to potentially be had, you know, at the expense of the long-term future of the club. Thiago Silva, in the greatest respect, is not part of Chelsea's long-term future. This will probably be his last season. Is it beneficial for us to be keeping the likes of Disasi or Badiashile. I mean, obviously Wesley Fofana, if he was fit, on the sidelines to play Thiago Silva. I mean, I'm just putting it out there. I'm not necessarily saying that's my opinion or I agree with it. But it's an interesting point. I mean, what are your thoughts on that potentially?
I think it massively depends on who we're playing. I could understand trying to experiment with a back four without Thiago in a game against Luton, for example, rather than in a game against Man City. So I feel like it depends on when and what game you want to experiment with that, because absolutely he's not gonna be around on the pitch at least forever. So at one point we need to integrate them. But I think it's very, very, very important that Poch is gonna pick which games he's going to do so, and not games like, for example, West Ham away. I would have personally preferred a more experienced, for example, Sterling taking that penalty rather than Enzo, because it was 1-1 when we needed to take that penalty. I feel like you'd rather go with certainty in a situation like that rather than trying to test the waters in a situation as such. So I personally feel like he needs to pick which games he's going to experiment with, rather than games where you're like, all right, you need stability and you need certainty, or as much certainty and stability you can get at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one because like centre backs a centre back partnership is something you don't want to be switching about on a regular basis. You want to build that continuity and that understanding. You really only want to make changes if it's for injuries, for example, or if you're playing like a lower league side in the cup or whatever. You don't want to be sort of making changes from week to week in the Premier League in your centre back pairing. Now, I'm sure Pochettino has got in mind what his best centre back pairing is, and if he thinks that's Thiago Silva and Levi Colwill, play that until there's reason not to play it. Like, I don't think it's going to be. And look, we've got a lot of very good centre backs. Obviously, you've still got the Sassy who's come in that can play a role. We've got Fofana who's injured. Chalobah's still at the club, although he'll probably be sold. There's Bashir Humphreys as well, who knows how he's going to get on if he goes out on loan and whatnot. But find your centre back partnership and just play it. I don't think we can afford to be in a situation where, you know, 1 week it's Silva and Colwill, and then the next week it's the Disasi, and then when Badiashile comes back, what happens then? You know, it's not like attacking players where you can have a bit of rotation, and you know, attackers are normally going to come on for another attacker at some point in the game, whereas you're unlikely to swap a centre back for a centre back unless there's injuries during the game. You swap a left winger for another winger or something, but with centre backs it's far less unlikely. I mean, for me personally, once Badiashile gets himself fit and up and running again, I actually think probably for the long-term future of the club, I don't know if Badiashile is better than Fofana or not. It's a tricky one, but for me, it's Badiashile or Fofana that partners Levi Colwill as our partnership going forward. But I mean, when Badiashile gets fit again, there's a big decision to be made. I mean, do you think that Badiashile and Colwill this season, if we play a back four, is our strongest and best partnership?
I
mean, I feel bad sort of talking about Silva, as in like, oh, he's finished or whatever. He's not. I think like we have to realise that this is going to be his last season, and him playing every week over Badiashile, for example, who's going to be a long-term part of the club. Is that the right thing to do? And is Silva playing over Badiashile gonna really is Badiashile playing over Silva really going to make that much of a difference to us coming in the top four? I personally don't think it is, but yeah, I almost feel a little bit bad talking about Silva like that. But we have to accept that tough decisions need to be made, and he's coming to he's coming to the end of the road. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because I think we do need to give players minutes that are going to be part of the project long term. I'm not saying just sit Thiago Silva on the sidelines for the rest of the season, but when Badiashile gets fit again, there's a big decision to be made. Unless we just stick with the back three, which I wouldn't like to think that's the case.
No, I absolutely get where you're coming from, and I just, it's just a lot of what ifs.
Mm.
What if this? What if that? Um, I rate Thiago Silva more than I rate anyone else. So it's probably the worst question you could ask me, because if I were to put that lineup out before, for example, Luton, I wouldn't drop Thiago Silva. I personally haven't seen him lacking anything or him showing signs of, oh, he's getting old. He is, to me, phenomenal. But with that being said, I absolutely get your point of view, and that's what I mean with trying to incorporate that in, like you said, the lower leagues games, instead of doing it randomly. We absolutely need to think ahead, because like you said, he's not going to be here forever. He's not going to be here as long as a lot of the younger players are. uh, so it is a question that's absolutely necessary to answer at a point. But at the moment, I wouldn't drop him. I genuinely would not.
No, I probably wouldn't either. And Badiashile's still not fit to return anyway. What would be ideal is if Badiashile can play against Wimbledon in the cup after Luton.
Mm.
That would make sense to get him
Yeah.
some minutes there, because we haven't got the Champions League football to make regular rotations.
Mm.
So there's going to be very few games where we can rotate and give players an opportunity to build their fitness up and a chance. So if he's fit for the cup, then I definitely play him. But I agree. I would still stick with Thiago Silva. I didn't, out of the three that played at the back against West Ham, he was the best for me. He was much better. He was better than Disasi and Cole, who I thought were both pretty poor. But if we look ahead to Luton Friday night, we've yet to win yet. I know it's the third game of the season, but this is must win already. Like,
Yeah.
it's 100% must win. And look, I'd love it to be a convincing 4 or 5-0 win, but I can't see that happening. I'd take any sort of win. But Luton are going to come and do what a lot of teams will do against Chelsea this season, and it's what we struggle to do. They'll come, they'll play on the counter attack, they'll look to try and get something from set pieces, and they're just going to put men behind the ball, and the impetus is going to be on us to break them down. And when that happens against a lot of teams last season, that happened. Even second half against West Ham, when they went down to 10, they just sat behind the ball. Impetus on us to break them down. I mean, even with an extra man, we couldn't do it. So Luton are going to do exactly the same. And it seems ridiculous to sit here and say, "Oh, I'm concerned that Chelsea won't beat Luton." I'm not. I think we will beat Luton, but we're going to have to do something that we really struggle doing, and that's breaking a side down that put men behind the ball. I mean, how are you feeling heading into this game?
It's a must win for me as well. I will find it very embarrassing if we do not, especially because it is on home soil. They I don't want to disrespect them in any way, but they're not Chelsea, they're not Arsenal, they're not United. I don't think there's any other option than us winning, and I don't really care how we're going to do it. I just want to make sure we leave Stamford Bridge with 3 points. Well, I was very naive after Liverpool and before Liverpool. I'm a bit more concerned now. I think a lot of games for us will still be tough, even though they are must-win fixtures. So I think it depends on a lot of things. I think it depends on how they train this week, how they like, even down to mental pep talks, how the formation is going to be, etc., etc., etc. So I don't know. I'm
I mean, it feels
because I want to say, oh yeah, sure, we're gonna smash them, but I thought we
I'm
were
not sure.
gonna go to London Stadium and smash West Ham, and that did not happen.
Yeah, it feels, it's a weird bit to be in, because like there was all that confidence after the Liverpool game, and then sort of came back down to reality against West Ham, and now I'm going into a game against Luton where you should never ever be questioning whether Chelsea can beat Luton Town at home, and yet I'm sitting there and I'm sort of slightly concerned that
Yeah.
it might be a bit trickier than we think it's going to be, and it's going to require, as I said, us to do things that we're not very good at, and so we're going to have to see whether we've actually improved on that situation or not. But one thing's for certain for me. We cannot see that back three again. Some one of those three needs to be dropped. Whether it's the Sassy, whether it's Thiago Silva, or whether it's Levi Colwell, we have to go with the back four. No more Ben Chilwell at left wing. No more Colwell going out to play at left back. And I thought when Tuchel left, that those days were gone of playing players not in their actual position. But it seems to be back already.
Yeah.
Just go with the back four. Go with. I don't even think. I'll be perfectly honest. We don't need three in midfield against Luton at home. You don't need to go Fernandes, Caicedo, Lavia. You don't need that much of a defensive-minded midfield at home.
What formation would you go with?
I'd go 4-2-3-1, and I'd have Sanchez in goal, Gusto, probably go Silva and Colwell and Chile. I'd have Enzo and Caicedo. I'd have Sterling, Mudryk, and Jackson as the front three. Because look, you could go 4-3-3 and you could play Conor Gallagher in the midfield with Enzo Fernandez. There's those two as number 8s. You could have that. I just realized I missed someone out when I went 4-2-3-1. I didn't put a 10 in. That's another issue. You could play Enzo Fernandez as a 10 and have Lavia and Caicedo as the pivot behind. But yeah, we don't need to go defensive against Luton. So you can afford to have more attacking players on the pitch for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think that once you sit back and sort of just wait for them to come, it's almost guaranteed to go wrong in a way, because you're literally just waiting. Eventually it will bite your ass and eventually it will go in. Because you're not. I firmly believe that the best defense is attacking rather than just sitting back and waiting. Because what are you waiting for you to concede? Like, it's way better to be up 2-0 rather than barely scoring and then they're one goal away from equalizing.
I think what we need to do is we need to start the game well. And I'll be honest, in the first two games, the first 20 minutes against Liverpool and the first 20-25 minutes against Liverpool, first 20-25 minutes against West Ham were both pretty poor. Sloppy starts in both those games. And then we grew into the game. Liverpool second half, really from when we equalised onwards, we dominated that game, even though we didn't get the win or whatever. West Ham, first 20 minutes, again, poor. But then we got the equaliser, we got into the game. Second half, we completely disappeared. So I think it's really important against a side that you are considerably better than. No disrespect to them, they lack quality in comparison to what we have. Obviously, Ross Barkley coming back to Stamford Bridge, so he's probably bound to score. And we just go out there and just from minute one take the game to them. The thing is, when a team sits deep, you've got to move the ball quickly and pass and move. Basics in football: pass and move, create spaces, try and catch players off guard or whatever. As soon as you slow it down and allow a team to get back into their defensive shape, you're making it so much harder for yourself. So all those things need to be addressed. I mean, I'd love to sit here and say it's going to be like 4-0, but I wouldn't be surprised if we only won maybe 1 or 2-0, or even if we conceded. But I mean, it's so important for momentum, this, because you look at the first 5 and it's Liverpool, West Ham, Luton, Forest and Bournemouth. And outside the Liverpool game, you're thinking that's probably 4 winnable games. Now, West Ham was a winnable game. We've lost that. Now, I think for me, we have to beat Luton. We have to beat Luton and Forest at home, and we have to beat Bournemouth away. And I just don't know if we're gonna do those things or not. But I mean, in terms of Luton, what are you thinking for a score prediction? What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, I think it's very typical of us to, whenever we play teams who we are supposed to be drastically better than, we sort of drop quality-wise, and rather than just playing 100%, I feel like we always drop down to 80 or almost 70, and makes it unnecessarily difficult for us rather than just driving them out of the field. I don't know, 2-1.
Yeah, I'd take a 2-1.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
100%.
not.
I
It's
mean,
just not an option not to win. But
no,
I
you have
think
to
it's
win this.
definitely going to be harder than we're hoping for.
Yeah, but this is going to be really, really tough. It's gonna be really it's going to be difficult, and it seems ridiculous saying that, but this is a new team, still a lot of unknowns, still a lot of things that need improving upon. Um, I'd probably go. I'd probably say I'd go with a 2-1, but
Mm,
again, um, yeah, I think 2-1. I think we'll just about get the job done. But for me, having not won the first two games, it's all about getting that first 3 points on the board,
yeah,
however it comes, and especially at an early stage of so many new players and a new manager. Like, I'm just about results over performances right now. I don't care if we play shit and win 1-0 every week. Like, just get the results, and then the performances will come. The more we get to know the manager, the more the players get to know each other. But yeah, it's going to be tricky. I mean, just lastly to round out, I mean, what are your I mean, we're 2 games in, still early days, but what are your expectations for this season? What, given the money we've spent, given the quality of players we've got, yes, there's a lot of work to go still, but what are your expectations for the season ahead?
um, I said before the season started that I was hoping for top six. I am still hoping for a top six. Um, it's still early. It's still hard to say if that's actually gonna happen. But what I feel like, once we actually get the grasp of it, and start to win and start to get these 3 points, I feel like it's almost like a snowball effect. And we have 3 games coming up that we should win. But I mean, Nottingham Forest last season, we couldn't do that either. It's just, there's still a lot of unknown things, even though I genuinely think it's a lot better. But we still need results at the end of the day, and that's what's going to be a lot better mentally for the players as well, because they're not going to walk away from a game and be like, oh, at least you had some really nice passes, if they didn't walk away with 3 points or any points at all. So at the end of the day, it comes down to winning, and that's going to create a better mentality. So I firmly believe once we get that going, it's going to have a snowballing effect. And yeah, sure, we're going to face opponents like City. This, how we're going to win against City, I sure as hell do not see it. But it's going to be easier to take a defeat against City if we know that we're going to win against Bournemouth, Luton, Nottingham Forest, etc. It's going to be more bearable to lose
Yeah,
against a side
I,
like City.
I think the biggest thing for me this season is that obviously we all want the results to be great, of course we do, but as long as we can see signs of improvement and the team's improving and there are positive signs in each game and we know it's going to get better, then I
Mm.
think you can put up with a few bad results here and there if you know
Yeah,
in the long run you can see it's going in the right direction and there
yeah.
are improvements in the way we're playing and you can see individual performances getting better. I think where people come disillusioned last year is that obviously we were losing every week, but
Mm.
there was also the thing where this team wasn't getting any better and there were no signs of anything getting any better
Mm.
at all. And I think this time round already, there's been signs that, you know what, with a bit of time, and I know time is not something that's common in football, but with a bit of time and the right development of these players, and I think we've got the perfect manager for it, this team will be a good team again.
Yeah.
Um, but it's it's just getting that, it's just having that time, and that's why I think as much as it's shit not being in the Champions League, having that extra time on the training pitch to get the new ideas across, the drill, the tactics, for the players to have more of an understanding with each other, it's actually could benefit us more in the long run, not being in
Yeah.
the Champions League. But for me, with the money spent, the quality of the players we've got, the fact we're playing once a week, we simply have to qualify for the Champions League again. Like, anything else for me is a failure in my opinion. Now, obviously going from 12th to 4th is going to be tricky. Obviously, 12th wasn't representative of what we are as a team, but I also feel that probably is fourth representative of where we are right now. Maybe not, and it's going to require a lot of improvements throughout the season for us to be able to get there. But I'm still confident we can get there. In terms of the domestic cups, I mean, League Cup, FA Cup, it's been a while since we had any domestic silverware. I think 2017 FA Cup final was the last time we did. Obviously, we've lost numerous domestic cup finals since then. How important is a domestic trophy this season? Because for me, I think it's really, really important that we get. I don't care if it's the League Cup, to be honest. It's just that thing that, you know, this group, new group of players, new manager, and the confidence it gives you, just proving and giving that belief that, you know what, as a group we can win. It's not necessarily about what the trophy represents. It's about, do you know what, as a team we can win. So for me, I think we should be taking the League Cup really seriously. Well, definitely both cups, but I mean, for me, I think the League Cup's one of them where obviously it's all draw. It's going to be draw dependent as well, but it's one of those where you don't have to win many games to get to the final, and it's a very, very winnable trophy and one that we should be taking seriously. I mean, do you think silverware this season domestically is out the question? I think it's more than doable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think any trophy is gonna, regardless of the size of the trophy, is gonna do something to their mentality and to the entire club's mentality. And we, like you, I actually think is a really good thing in light of last season that we do not have to worry about such a massive tournament like Champions League. We do not have to worry about that at all. But I genuinely think that it's still competitive. We should not just, it's fine, we just need to survive and focus on Premier League. No, we're still a massive club. I'd still argue with the biggest club in London. And of course we should take these tournaments serious and try and actually win them, because we have less to worry about than we had last season. And yeah, there might be smaller trophies, but there's still trophies, and it's going to integrate new players differently into the team as well and into the club as well, because they're gonna feel like they're more part of it because they've made history. Do you know what I mean? Like, they've written themselves into the club. Back in the days, I was helping blah blah blah, winning this trophy, blah blah blah. Like, it's gonna do something to them mentally, and I strongly believe that football is as much mentally as it is physically. I feel like it's very basic. You need to be mentally stable in order to perform in anything.
You just need to believe in yourself as well. And I think that's a massive thing that was missing last season, was a belief. And whether that's lack of belief coming from the managers or whether that's lack of belief from within the playing squad as well. I think it's a combination of the two. When you're losing every week, it's quite normal to question your ability, and you think, shit, can we actually win? Are we actually any good? Because when the same thing keeps happening over and over again, like, it's only natural for you to question your self-belief. And I think one thing that I've noticed massively is that the place seems really happy again. Like players are genuinely happy to be there, which is why this clear out's been so good, because we've got rid of everyone that didn't want to be at the club anymore, and now you've got a group of players that all want to be here, are all going in the same direction, all believe in the manager, are all buying into the manager's methods, and hopefully that's going to be, you know, breeding grounds for success for the season coming and for years going forward. But absolutely, it's not just about a player's ability and a squad's ability in the squad. It's about like, mentally, is it right? Because I think you can win a game in a tunnel. Like, if your mentality is off, and the other team, even if the other team is just more up for it than you will lose. Even if you're supposedly on a lot better side, if you're not in the right headspace for a game, and I think that was the case on numerous occasions last season, then you will lose, no matter how much worse the other team reportedly is than you. So I think the mentality is going to improve, and like, from what Pochettino's been saying, I know it's only words, and words is only half of it, but everything he says, you think, yeah, I see that. What he's saying is, it makes sense. It's like, it's a good level of mentality. The way that he speaks, the way that he communicates with the players and all that sort of thing. It's all good things, but ultimately the talking isn't really what matters. It's what happens on the pitch that matters. But I think he's installed confidence in me, and I think a large section of the fan base, that under his guidance, this team is going the right way, and we will win again. So, but it's just a case of when. That's the only thing. I'm confident we'll win again, but I don't know if it's going to be this season, next season, couple seasons time. But this team, I promise, this team will win again. But I don't know when it's going to be. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there for this week's episode. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below. As always, smash a like on the video, subscribe to Chelsea Fan TV if you haven't done so already, and we'll catch you again in another episode soon, guys.